I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The election this past week, the primary election, had few surprises and unfortunately fewer voters. Mariana Cordier, a local attorney, will comment on this primary election. The League of Women Voters of the United States of America had its national convention recently, and some very interesting topics will be reviewed and studied over the next 2 years. Elaine Apter from the League attended the convention. She's here to report. The challenges that young women face in our community and around the country, in fact, are increasing in number, and they're also increasing the need of creative solutions that can be found to meet them. Here in Montgomery County, we have Jeffrey Slavin, a local philanthropist, who's helping to support a number of organizations doing just this. He's here to discuss two programs, Generation Hope and Community Bridges, as well as several others of interest to our community. Our local Coalition for the Homeless has joined the national organization, which strives to provide housing for over 100,000 people across our country. Susie Sinclair-Smith, the executive director of the Montgomery County Coalition for the Homeless, has news of the success of this program. Mariana, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
What a lonely experience in many of the precincts this past Tuesday in this primary election. I was thinking, what if we held an election and nobody came?
I don't know if everyone was watching World Cup or they just were disinterested or what was the issue, but the turnout was very low. The estimate is about 4%. But, you know, at the same time, we were very familiar with the candidates. We knew who they were. They have a history with the county and for the state. So, you know, people knew if they wanted to vote for Brown or for Gansler or Missouri.
You're talking about the gubernatorial race.
Gubernatorial race.
Well, let's go through. Let's go right now. Let's talk about the races. Because one of the things I also talked to an election judge, and apparently we had a lot of issues with some of the precincts.
Yes.
Machines breaking down,
Yes.
despite the low turnout, long lines at a couple of precincts. Incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, some of these election officials not getting out of the polling places until 1 o'clock in the morning because of the incompetency of the Board of Elections in Montgomery. It's unbelievable. Let's not get to that until the end.
No.
What's going on? What happened with the gubernatorial race? Let's start with that one.
Well, I think Brown started strong, and you know, he didn't have the same amount of money as Gansler, but he had a lot of support. He had been. It's almost as if he ran as an incumbent because he is lieutenant governor. Gansler waited a long time to announce. He did announce. His message was a bit confusing. It wasn't.
Well, he got caught up with some
and
scandals
he got
early
caught
on.
on.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah.
He got caught up with a scandal with the
party.
state troopers,
Right.
and then with Beach Week.
When he
you
showed
know,
up at his son's
right,
party.
and everyone got him on.
Interesting. Heather Mazier finished just
showing.
behind Doug
Yes.
Gansler. What happened on that? That's quite a surprise,
What
isn't it?
that is. Go ahead.
She ran quite a campaign.
Yes.
really.
Yeah.
She was
Issue oriented.
She was very issue oriented. She was very progressive in her issues, but she would engage the conversation that I think a lot of the other candidates here and across the country are scared to talk about, particularly the legalization of marijuana. And
She wanted to bring Maryland to a higher plane?
she wants to bring Maryland into a plane that doesn't. I would say it's almost what she's saying is the old argument of prohibition.
Okay,
with
look,
alcohol, we're talking about.
Okay, Governor,
with
let's
marijuana.
move on to the next one.
Oh.
County executive. We don't have much time here. So let's
Ike
keep going.
Leggett got the county executive. He won that.
Okay, our incumbent.
He's
so
our
he'll be going for
incumbent.
the third term, right?
He is going for his
And
third term.
didn't he announce that he was not going to run for office?
He
How
did.
He
He
then
did.
how did he still win?
Well, I think he announced that he did not want to run, and then he saw that Doug Duncan and Phil Andrews were going to run, and I guess he thought he needed to. I'm not sure what the
Had
inside-
Jeffrey Slavin put his hat in the ring, he certainly wouldn't have run again.
Yeah, that is a bit. But it was interesting because at the polls, there were a lot of people who weren't even aware that Doug Duncan was actually running, and so, you know, I think that's a comment on how some of the campaigns were run, perhaps. And then, you know, in the Washington Post, there was a commentary about, well, you know, we've got Ike Leggett, but nobody's really happy with that. So it was like no one was really happy with the options, and so they just didn't show up to vote. And those who did show up, you know, their vote counted. Montgomery County.
How much did the negative council was another one? That,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
that
You're saying-
people
How much
didn't-
did the negative campaigning affect turnout or affect people's
Well,
engagement with the
Interestingly enough, negative campaigning seems to be very, very unpopular and doesn't resonate with Montgomery County voters. And it was interesting because Montgomery County had one of the lower turnouts in the state.
That's what I was
And so I think that that's something for candidates in the future to take into consideration.
We had a, go ahead, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just going to say there were also a lot of comments where I was on the written stuff, that the mail that came in, and some of it even came in after the election, which was,
You know, maybe the most interesting statewide race was the Attorney General race, where you
Right.
had the name recognition. It reminded me very much of the Mark Shriver versus Chris Van Hollen
Right.
race with Congress back in 2002, where you had the name, you had John Carden, the nephew of our U.S. Senator, with the name, but like the other namesake back in 2002, didn't like to go to Annapolis as much as he otherwise could have. You had this hardworking Montgomery County State Senator,
Who was
Chris
endorsed
Van
by everybody.
endorsed by everybody, Brian
And the
Fosh.
newspapers and the governor and most of the statewide
But wasn't that
elected officials.
refreshing
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
to
and
see
that
him
he-
win because
yeah.
hard work and
Yeah.
dedication?
No,
and-
absolutely, and that's the thing. I mean, if you go knocking on doors, and if you go talking to people, and you go to events, and you are visible, and you talk to you directly connect with your constituency, that has a positive effect.
But on Frosch, it's not. I don't think it was that. It was that he has this record of having accomplished all these things
Yes.
statewide.
Yeah.
I don't know, 17, District 17. What happened to the Senate race? Because that was a big one. We've got 30 seconds left. You've got to. That was
Cheryl Kagan,
Cheryl-
Liz Simmons.
Yeah.
Lou
Lou
Simmons.
Simmons.
And I think Cheryl Kagan won.
Yes, handily.
Anything
Yeah.
to teach us about anything lessons from there?
Well, I mean, I think she had run previously, so this was kind of the second attempt, and she had run against Lou before, so it was very clear that it was for the Senate seat this time, and they were both really duking it out, but she grabbed the momentum. And
She was endorsed by the governor and Chris Van Hollen and the previous incumbent.
Right.
One
So
last
that's-
word, one last thing. Big turnout in the general or continuing dwindling? Maybe we'll get to 2% or
I'm
something.
not so sure the general's going to have a large turnout unless people really motivate the voters. And the only thing I could see motivating the voters is perhaps the Republicans getting out there and creating
Okay.
some kind of
Could be
issue.
a
But
negative
other than that,
campaign. they're getting
gubernatorial
negative
race,
campaign,
that could
yeah.
affect
The
the
people are tired of
gubernatorial
that.
race.
That's the final word. Thank you very much. That's great. People who can get us all educated about what we're going to be facing in the general election, the League of Women Voters of
You
Maryland
got
and of
it.
Montgomery County. But we're
Right.
talking about the convention.
Yes, every 2 years they have
Okay.
a national convention.
Okay.
And it was held in Dallas this year. And one of the main things they do is vote on what they are going to study for the next 2 years.
What are we going to study for the next 2 years?
So we had two things that were right on top, and one was redistricting and the other was campaign finance.
And you stood up about redistricting. You come from a state where we're
We-
proud of the
we-
redistricting.
That's right. I mean, the League
Gerrymander.
of Women Voters was right there screaming. But one of the things that we looked at national is with campaign finance, there was a big push for a constitutional amendment.
Okay.
And the convention and the leaders looked and said, do you know what you're getting yourself into if you go for a constitutional amendment? And most of the people really, it says in the Constitution exactly what you have
Right.
to have and how to go about it. But what are the ramifications if you do something like this, especially if you call a constitutional convention?
But
you
there'd be a
never
there'd be a
want to
special,
open that door.
But there'd be a
Right.
special place in heaven if you could get that through. Get the get these
right.
incumbents who
Wouldn't it-
benefit from the current
It
laws.
would be fascinating. So that was what was passed, is a 2-year study on the process of amending the Constitution, because it's never been amended.
I wonder if
since
that would
the
engage
original.
people in the democratic process. You know, we were talking about apathy earlier.
And that's
if there's
what we're
something
hoping,
that's
because
truly vital like that.
we have to say Citizens United has really.
Well, that's right.
And the other thing
And
that
Citizens United was the case where
yeah,
corporations
right,
unlimited
are people,
people too.
right.
Walk-a-doo, walk-a-doo.
They have their right of speech, so they can spend as much money as they want, and so it's going to be very interesting to see just what the process is going to be, and if it's something we really want to pursue or go a different way. But one of the things that came out was the power of the Supreme Court now, because it's so hard to amend the Constitution. what the Supreme Court, the judges decide, is really how the Constitution is interpreted.
Which is what the founding fathers wanted, but it's a
Right.
5-4. We've been getting a lot of 5-4 decisions, so we're not seeing overwhelming 8-1, 9-0. It's that
close.
ideologically
Yes.
split court, which doesn't give a lot of confidence. I wouldn't think for the legal voters, not a lot of confidence.
Well, yeah, it's something that is not all one way or the other, and so we
I think
really
it's
have to
also a
look.
timing issue. I mean, politically, I mean, we all like to think about the Constitution and everything else as something that, you know, doesn't have any political ramifications or is not affected by politics, but that's not the case at all. And so I think there is some consideration that if you're going to do something like that, you know, be sure what your Supreme Court is likely to do, you know, where the leanings are, and to wait it out perhaps when the court's not so divided. Because to have a constitutional question come up and have a decision done so divided doesn't help the confidence of the voters or the population.
What are you going to do? What's the league in the county, Montgomery County, going to do in terms of putting forward what was decided in Dallas at the convention?
Well, I think one of the things we have is, if anybody's interested, we have a wonderful PowerPoint and presentation on campaign finance and just what the ramifications are. And we can speak to groups about that, because if any of them, your poverty groups, your environmental groups, all of these are affected by campaign finance. And I think it's important to let the voters know just how this affects.
And these are the groups that don't have the voice.
And
that
these
can
are the
rise
groups that
above.
don't have the, right.
Right.
So.
Yeah, because you always hear sometimes the voters say, "Oh, well, I don't understand why won't anyone listen to this? This is an important issue, homelessness," and it's just that some of the nonprofits, you know, really they're small and they don't have a voice. But if there's a way to adjust how the campaign financing is done, or a way for them to get together and to really
Okay.
then
I think for
bring
nonprofits, there are issues to get around, such as the
Right.
lack of affordable housing in Montgomery County and the need to invest in that. And
Right.
I think that
And
will bring everybody together.
I
and
think so
create a
too.
voice.
And of course, you need to bring people together because you don't have the funding clout.
Right.
So you need to work that.
But you're always
clout
going to be
in other ways.
disadvantage vis-a-vis the developers who don't want to have that
Right.
invested, and the big money saying. About 15 seconds. You're hopeful about that the league will continue to make progress on these important issues?
Oh, yes, most definitely. And since we do have positions on campaign finance and redistricting at the local level
Okay.
and state level, we're going to continue working while we study.
And I can't wait to hear more results and have you back here again, Elaine, in the future. Thank you very much. We'll be right back after these important messages. The always enlightening Jeffrey Slavin is back with us. Mayor, philanthropist.
Great to be here.
Bon vivant.
Great to be here.
Women's groups or organizations helping girls are near and dear to you. Tell us about some
Well,
of those.
I'm really interested in raising up our low-income citizens in Montgomery County. And as many of you probably know, the poverty in our region, the households that are women-headed are 72% of those households are in poverty.
That's what a horrible statistic. And
72% of the households in poverty are headed by women.
right.
Correct. And so there's some great organizations in our region and based in Montgomery County that are helping to rise people up, prevent homelessness.
Well, let's talk about a couple of them.
Okay.
We talked about in the opening. Community Bridges, for instance. What does Community Bridges do?
Well, Community Bridges works mostly with girls and mostly in the east part of the county.
Okay.
And they teach leadership skills, empowerment, making the right choices,
Right.
career, helping girls to stay in school, essentially.
You know,
and lots of immigrants.
You know, I had an interesting time. I went down to El Salvador with the beginning of the sister city relationship between Montgomery County and Morrison. A delegation from Community Bridges were a part of us under the then director,
okay,
Ana
great.
Lopez.
Oh, right, who's now
And they
in
went
the
in
county.
and they did leadership training in this high school in El Salvador. And there was El Salvadoran immigrant kids working with El Salvadoran. It was fantastic.
Right.
You're a great
And these
learning
kids, they
experience.
and the teachers were. I mean, it's what a wonderful, wonderful
Well,
organization.
some studies have said that when there's co-education, which is the
Boys and girls together.
right, but there's very few single-sex schools anymore, and so I think they have found in some studies that that boys usually assume all the leadership roles because girls, for whatever, are intimidated, and a lot of these groups
Well,
help empower
And
girls.
it's cultural. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
talking about an immigrant
Correct.
community, a Latin
Right.
That's right.
community, the women are somewhat raised to
Middle East
defer
also.
Middle Eastern to the male, and I think
African.
and the same in
Sure.
the African
Right.
communities. But I think the interesting thing about schools that are all girls schools is that it gives the girls a chance to shine, and it gives them they're going to
Right.
compete within their small enclosed community for the leaders to emerge and such, and women have the single
Right.
mother home is very difficult because they have
Right.
child support issues,
Right.
they have education
Right.
issues,
Okay.
work
Healthcare,
issues,
healthcare.
So we got-
healthcare, daycare.
So we've got Community Bridges. What's the second organization?
Well, the other one that I wanted to talk about was Generation Hope, and that's an organization that helps teen parents, but mostly girls, get through college.
Okay.
Because studies have shown, of course, if you get through college, the likelihood of success is much higher.
Right. Okay.
So,
And also, it's a great role model for their children. as
Oh,
well.
Right.
definitely,
Daycare centers were mentioned. I mean, that's a big problem if the mother is going to try
No
and go to
question.
school.
No question.
Are there provisions for daycare?
well,
for
the
child-
Generation Hope is a sort of one-on-one mentoring program, and I think that the mentor helps the young mother
Okay.
deal with those issues and find what there are resources out there. A lot of times the young women can't find them, and that's what a lot of these groups do.
We've got about a minute and a half left. We could talk forever on this.
Yes.
You've got other organizations you want to mention. If you could maybe name them briefly, and then let us know how can the audience get more engaged in helping
Go
these wonderful
online.
girls.
Go online. The High Tea Society, the Tikkun Olam Women's Foundation. They're sort of a grant-making group, and also the Washington Area Women's Foundation. Not only do they grant money to organizations that empower women and girls, they also do these groundbreaking studies like the one that showed the level of poverty in female-headed households. So I'd urge all of us and all of the viewers to get involved.
I thought today the president is having lunch with a woman who wrote to him. She's married, 2 kids, talking about how putting the 2 kids into daycare was more expensive than their mortgage.
Oh, right.
Crazy.
It's crazy. A lot of times the daycare costs more than their salary.
And there's a great subsidy program in Montgomery County. We're very progressive and significant resources committed to underserved and low-income populations, but then at times there are caps on the numbers of subsidies available, and then if somebody's got a job that they can go to but they don't have any place to put their children, then they're in a catch-22.
But Ike Leggett and First Lady Catherine Leggett have been real leaders in this area.
And now we'll have another 4 years, as we heard
We'll have
from
another 4
Mariana.
years.
If he wins the general election.
Right,
It's only
that's
the primary.
right. I think he's going to win, and I'm looking forward to working with him because he's always there for these groups.
And Jeffrey, we know that you're always there as well.
I'm always there,
And
too.
we're always here for you and look forward
And
to
there's
having you
great
coming back.
panelists there too.
Susie,
Yes.
welcome. I think this is your
Thank
first time
you.
on our show.
Yes, this is a thrill to be here and also to be with this great group. I've enjoyed it.
Now we've talked about poverty. We've talked about some of the issues, girls, and some of the things the league's been focusing on. Certainly, the election and will have some impact on it. But here we are. We're talking about the poorest of the poor right now in our community. We're talking about homeless individuals and homeless families. Give us a little bit of an idea of what the problem, what the issue is in Montgomery County that we're facing, because they're often in the shadows.
Often in the shadow, and homelessness is a result of failed systems, but also the main underlying cause is the lack of affordable housing in Montgomery County. There's a sustainability wage that's been determined that if you're a single adult, you need to make $33,000 a year to be able to afford a place to live. If you're a mother with a small child and a toddler, you need to make $77,000.
Can we put that into perspective? 77,000 is 2,000 hours of a full-time job approximately.
Exactly.
So that person, in order to make an affordable, just the bottom line at 77,000, they're going to have to make at least 30 $38, $39
Exactly.
an hour
Exactly.
for 2,000 hours to get to that.
So there are two
That's
underlying
not
issues.
The,
It's
the
a-
minimum wage, I think, is $7.25
Exactly,
or something,
yes.
$7.50.
Exactly.
You
yes.
can't get there.
And I think you need to have 4 jobs at the minimum wage.
And
for
a lot of
affordable
people are
housing in the
working
county.
in our county. A lot of immigrant women and men are working many jobs
Just
and
to-
7 days a week.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very proud to be a part of the movement to end homelessness in
Yeah.
Montgomery County. We work very well with the county executive, the county council, our agencies. We saw an 11% decrease in homelessness in Montgomery County this past year, and
Fantastic.
we're committed to continuing that. We've been part of a very exciting national campaign. We're one of 230 communities throughout
Okay.
the country to end homelessness for the most medically vulnerable individuals.
Who are they?
That research has found that people who experience homelessness for the long term have a 25-year less life expectancy. They're residents of Montgomery County who have had hard times, who have fallen into homelessness,
Sure.
have not been able to get out. We interviewed people in the woods. It was a survey developed by Boston Healthcare for the Homeless and identified the characteristics that would lead to somebody dying on the street. We had our council chair, Craig Rice, George Leventhal join us at 3 in the morning, finding encampments in the backyards of their communities. But we identified 159 people who are likely to face death because of their homelessness. And we are committed to ending their homelessness. We've now housed about 30 of those individuals with the help of the county council,
Okay.
providing supplemental appropriation. We're committed to housing the next 120 individuals. I think we all believe that if any place can end homelessness, it's Montgomery County, but
We would hope
nobody
so.
should die
Right.
because they don't have a home in
Is
Montgomery
there
County.
a problem finding the people? Are they reluctant to come and ask for help? Do
No,
you
we
to
have
be
very
aggressive?
sophisticated outreach organizations in Montgomery County who know how to go out in the woods, connect with people. We run the Maine Men's Emergency Shelter. We have very deep services there. I think if you ask anybody if they would like a home, they would say yes. And I think the way to present the option is not to create barriers, but help people
your
have a roof
statistics-
over their head, and then they can move on.
Statistically, how many of the homeless are individuals that are struggling with mental health issues that maybe perhaps that's affecting also their ability to?
And recent veterans from
And
the wars, a
recent
lot of those
veterans,
folks,
yeah.
sure, with that same
And
mental
we
health.
found 23 veterans in our registry week of that 159. That's a significant issue. We, at our men's emergency shelter, we see about 800 men each year. I'd say we think about a half to 2/3 experience behavioral health problems. We have on-site psychiatric services at our shelter through
Okay.
Cornerstone Montgomery. So
Right.
we were there to smother people with services and end their homelessness.
Is the profile of the homeless person in Montgomery County different than in other parts of the region?
Well, what we're finding is that our homeless population is now becoming more vulnerable because we have been able to move those who are more able into permanent housing with supportive services. So now, but it is a standard. I think most people just need a little bit of assistance to move out of homelessness, but there are a core group, about 10 to 20%, who really need supportive services, housing, and it's. I want to commend you, Mayor Slavin, for your leadership on this issue and
Thank
your
you.
support of all of us. You've been a real outspoken advocate, and
It's an important
been,
issue for
been
everybody here
wonderful.
Yes.
and on.
yes.
Thoughts on how, on looking ahead to the next 3 years? We've got 30 seconds left. Next 3 to 5
Sure.
years. Give us a window on what you're going to be doing.
Well, we will be focusing on ending homelessness for that 159 group. We now have a new strategic plan to end homelessness in the county. We've seen an increase in youth homelessness, so we're going to be connecting them either back with their families or moving them onto independent living. So we're really going to be pursuing strategies that we know work for particular populations and target them.
And the council with incumbents seeming all winning should be should
We
county
were. I
executive.
stayed up until 3 a.m. trying to find Jeffrey speaking. Yes, wonderful.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank
Well,
you so
thank
much,
you.
Susie. I want to thank
Yeah.
all of you today for joining me, and I want to thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers. Please join us next week at this very same time.